Hey there, how's it going? Yes, another game jam. Okay, I might have a problem. If you've watched any of my other videos, there's a good chance you know that I really like game jams. They're just my favorite way to make a small experience that I hope others will enjoy. As a designer, I get to experiment with different ideas without too much investment. And there's a great community aspect as well, as everyone gets to see the concepts each other comes up with using the same base. There are always so many jams going on at any given time that it can be difficult to pick which one you want to do. But you have to be careful. If you do jams back to back with no breaks, you run the risk of burning out pretty hard. Last year, all in 1 month, I participated in 3 different game jams as well as ran one of my own. And it trashed me. But several friends I knew were all running jams at the same time, and I wanted to participate and support each of them. Cut to many months later, and deja vu, it's happening again. I have several streamer friends that are all hosting jams that are all happening really close together. And at the moment, I don't have time to do all 3, so I figured I just wasn't going to do any of them because Ludum Dare is right around the corner. But I can't leave it like that. I had a few spare days last week, and I've seen other people do one game for multiple game jams before. I normally don't like to do that sort of thing myself. I've never done it in the past, and it's not something that I'm really going to make a habit of. But because I knew the organizers of each of the jams, and they didn't have any rules against it, I figured why not give myself a bunch of themes and restrictions and see what I could come up with. There are a few days when all of the jams overlap, so I figured I could try and sneak something in during that time. I have a lot going on as usual, so I'm giving myself 3 days to get this game made and submitted to all 3 jams. Alright, it's time for the fun part. What are the themes and restrictions we have to work into our game? First up, the Vaultacular Game Jam number 2. This jam is put on by White Vault, who I've talked about several times on this channel before. I just did the Wowie Game Jam with him where he made all of the art for Reaper Repeat. Also, one of the 3 jams that I had my burnout with before was the very first Vaultacular Game Jam where I made a game called Flyer Kid. There's a card up top if you'd like to check out the video about that. And for this first jam, the theme is a strange influence, and the restriction is 3 items. Jam number 2 is Matzi's Jammy Jam. I've known Matzi makes for a while now, and I hang out in his streams all the time. He's the reason I tried making voxel art a while back, and now I have these little dudes, which I love. This jam also ends on his birthday, where he'll be playing all of the games, so I'm glad I can make something for it. For this jam, the theme is Embiggen, and the restriction is make it blocky. And finally, the Kindred Community Jam number 6. You may know Kindred here on YouTube as well under the name Michael Kacha. He's making an amazing game called Swords and Magic and Stuff that I've been following and playing for a good while now. I did the Community Jam number 4 back in my crazy month and never ended up making a video about it because of the burnout. So I'm glad I get another chance to participate in one of their jams and make a video about it. For this jam, the theme is At the Beginning, There Was Nothing. This jam doesn't have any restrictions, so to keep all the numbers nice and consistent, I chose one that I've wanted to do for a little while and could really make me think when making everything work. So I'm adding in the personal restriction of mouse-only controls. Alright, we have 3 themes, 3 restrictions, and 3 days. Let's go. Concepting with this many themes and restrictions is pretty tricky, so I just kind of built it up one by one and tried to make it all work. I started with mouse only because it dictates a lot. I wanted to use a pick up and move idea. I've played with it once before, over a year ago, and I wanted to see what else I could do with this concept. For strange influence, I thought about creatures frozen in space by some unseen force. Then I could use an auto-scrolling camera so the player has to pick up and move objects so they don't fall off the back of the screen. So if the player doesn't pick up their character and move them, they'll either die if they get pulled off the screen or crushed by a wall or some other form of failure. I haven't figured that part out yet. The player will need to collect 3 items along the way that will help with progression through the level. Fairly simple on that one. As the level moves on, you'll have to pick up more and more characters which will embiggen your party. I set the game in a prison where you're trying to help the prisoners who begin with nothing. I might be stretching a little bit on this one, but cut me some slack. Last but not least, we'll make it blocky in the art and by putting a grid on it. After brainstorming and refining ideas with my Twitch chat, I got to work to see if this would actually be fun. Pretty quickly, I had a moving camera and the ability to pick up and move orange player boxes. A huge thank you to my buddy Wallaber for helping me find a formula I needed to make the player squares snap to the grid, which helped a ton. I thought it was going to be really difficult to figure out how to make this work. Turns out, it's 1 line of code. Who knew? Cool, that's the base mechanics in. Now I've got to add the secondaries. The 3 items the characters will be able to pick up are a shield, a sword, and a key. Once a character touches an associated item, they turn into a profession that uses that item. The plan is to make it that you'll need to use all 3 in combination to be able to make it to the end of the level. I started with the shield, by adding in a turret that would fire continuously, and you would have to make a defender character that could then block those projectiles, allowing other characters to move behind them. For the sword, enemies will block the path until the character picks it up and becomes a warrior. Then, when they're within range of an enemy, they will deal damage until the enemy dies and disappears. For the key, the locksmith will work pretty much exactly the same way as the warrior, just with a different skin. Instead of fighting enemies, it will deal damage to a door until the door takes enough damage and disappears. For my workflow, once I have a majority of the mechanics in, it's time to start figuring out what the game is going to look like. As always when starting art, I grabbed a color palette from lowspec.com. This time, I'm using the Multi-24 palette by Groxsky. I made a quick list of all of the core art that I was going to need, and I got to designing. When it comes to creating characters, sometimes I have an idea right away, and other times, I just have to fiddle around until I find something I like. My personal goal is always to make something that's cute, as it's the aesthetic that I like to make. The first character I tried out was a pretty stout little dwarf that ultimately just didn't resonate with me. With a little more time, I'm pretty sure I could have made this work and it would have been cute, but I just wasn't feeling it, and sometimes that's enough for me to scrap something and start over. Then I thought about Motzi's restriction of make it blocky, which reminded me that in Kindred's game, Swords and Magic and stuff, all the characters have cute blocky heads. And that's enough tie-in for me to make some characters that were inspired by Kindred's. This clicked almost instantly for me, and now I really love these little goblin friends. After a little playing, the base character is looking the way I wanted, and now it's time to do the transformations. I made an angry looking warrior, a heavily armored defender, and I don't know why the locksmith ended up looking kind of like a middle-aged guy, but it's super cute and it made me laugh. Yes, I know the defender looks like it's wearing diamond armor from Minecraft. I didn't mean to do this. I was playing around with the different colors in the palette and these ones just stood out the most. But since most everyone knows about Minecraft, I figured leaving it in would make it very clear to the players at a glance that this was the defender wearing armor. And I left it. That night after the stream, I spent a little more time getting some of the basic art needs together, which continued into the next day's stream. And after a couple more hours of art, it's finally time to start adding it in to see how it actually looks in the game. Before I start building levels, I like to try and create a small vertical slice which has all of the art and core mechanics in it to really just see how they all feel and look together. That was pretty much my whole stream, making art, adding it to the game. I introduced a couple more bugs, but nothing major in terms of the programming side. I did make it so that the characters get pushed along with the camera and not die if they go off the back of the screen. They'll only die if they hit the spikes or the enemies, if they're not the warrior, or if they get crushed against the wall in the back of the screen. I spent the night finalizing a few more things, like getting in some lighting effects and getting all of the death mechanics working, or so I thought. My final day to work on the game, and I still have so much to do. At this point, I still don't have any functioning levels, so we started off the day by designing one out and seeing how it could work. And per usual with me, level design takes so long. When working with a tile map, I do the whole layout and testing with just a solid color, and then I go back at the end and actually add in all the decorations. I find it saves time because you don't have to keep redoing certain pieces and adjusting the way things look for corners and edges. After almost an hour and a half to make a single level, I realized I couldn't spend my entire time doing this. I still had a lot more to do. I could feel the time crunch at this point as one of the jams was ending later that night, so I had a hard deadline that I had to get this done by. We had one level, so at the very worst, I could at least finish the game with one level and call that good. It's not ideal, but it's at least a safety net. The game is completely silent at this point, so we switched gears to add sound, which is very important when you're making a game to the overall feel. Now, I freely admit that I am not the best with audio, and I tend to end up leaving it far too long and kind of adding it in a rush at the end. I was dreading sifting through my sound effects library, and I jokingly said that I should just make all the sound effects with my mouth. I've been playing the game Hidden Folks a bunch recently, which all of the sound effects in that game have mouth sound effects, and if you've never tried it out, it's super cute, you should. Suffice it to say, once I said that, my chat loved the idea, and a poll was run and everyone voted for mouth sound effects. This actually ended up being a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed this process. If you've never tried this out, I would highly recommend giving it a go. If for nothing else, then there's a ton of laughs to be had. Luckily, I ended up with a lot of really cute sounds that I'm super pleased with, and it ended up giving a really nice charm to the game. After the stream, the rest of the night was kind of a blur. I was able to create 2 more levels. The one I made on stream was pretty hard, and I needed something easier to prep the players up for it. I added instruction text throughout the level to help guide the player through how the game works. I had to change the way death worked for the characters in the game. I had originally planned to track how many prisoners you made it to the end with, meaning you could lose some along the way. If one of your transformed characters died, it would just drop the item that it had and you could pick it up with a different one. But I ended up not implementing this super well, and I ran into so many problems with the items becoming inaccessible or getting stuck or something else that I just had to nix the idea entirely and just say that if any of your prisoners meet an unfortunate end, you lose and have to start over. I kind of feel like in the end, this simplified the game a little bit and made it a lot more straightforward and enjoyable. I was also also running into some frustrations where the level was moving just far too slowly in some parts, which I found annoying. So for a little player quality of life, I added the ability to hold right click, which would speed up the camera while it's held down. I finished up all the last bits and bobs like menus, end screens, music. No, I didn't end up making the music with my mouth. Nobody wants to hear that. I promise you don't. And I was able to submit the game to the first Jams deadline with 8 minutes left to spare. Not cutting it close at all, right? Now, the Vault Jam isn't judged, and you are allowed to make some tweaks and updates afterwards, and the other 2 jams hadn't finished yet, so I did make 2 small changes a couple days later. One was to adjust the difficulty in the last level because it was just far too hard. It's always tough to balance difficulty, especially in a time crunch. I ended up removing one of the prisoners, and I moved some of the enemies around to make it a little easier in a certain hallway. And second, I fixed a hitbox issue that was killing the prisoners when it really shouldn't have been. The issue was if the character was next to a wall and the camera pushed it up by it, there was the tiniest bit of overlap and the character would die. This was a super simple fix, a slight shrinking of the collision area on the player, and it fixed it right up. And in the end, this is the game. You start the level in a prison cell with your character, which begins with nothing. A strange presence has made all of the guards in the prison disappear, but it's also made all of the prisoners incapable of moving. You're stuck in this room until a key falls from the ceiling. Gotta get that Dark Souls reference in. But what this does is it allows the player to pick up and move their character in a stress-free environment where the camera isn't moving yet. Once they unlock the door, the camera begins moving, and from there, you must use the mouse to move the prisoners through the treacherous dungeon. You must collect 3 key items to help you escape, all while embiggening your blocky-headed group of prisoners. And if you can get all of them to the exit ladders, you win. I ran out of time for the win screen, so it just kind of quickly tells you won and then kicks you back to the menu. Sometimes it's just what happens in a game jam. You gotta roll with it. At least it functions. I'm really pleased with how this game turned out, and I had a great time taking so many different themes and restrictions and making them all work together. I can honestly say that I wouldn't have come up with something like this without them. For me, this mechanic of picking up and carrying multiple objects to the goal while the camera's moving on its own is something totally new to me. I wouldn't doubt that there are other games out there that have done something similar to this, but I don't know of any. If you do know of other games that use a very similar mechanic, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to check them out and see how other people handle this idea. This whole thing was an absolute blast, and if you would like to try the game out, there's a link in the description below. There will also be links to all 3 jams that I submitted to, where you can go and check out the other games and see what other people made. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'd like to give an extra special shout out to my amazing patrons, especially Abishan, Clone13, Kranu, Daniel Martin, David Scott, Hunshrimp, Nightfall, Kevin Halgau, Kirby, who was recently in an accident. My heart goes out to you, and I hope for the quickest and easiest of recoveries. Kormai, Liam Sorta, MLK, Matzi Makes, Nazar Salim, Salty Pretzel, Scott Hansen, Soapy Gnome, and Straight Up Gruntle. You're all awesome people, and I truly can't thank you enough for the support. To see and be part of the game making process live, please come say hi at twitch.tv/Vimlark, or you can message me on Twitter or join the Discord with a lot of other really cool people. I hope you're all healthy and safe wherever you are, and I will talk with you next time. Have a good one. Later.